All we hear about today is mental health issues. Sounds like everybody's depressed all the time. We're all addicted to our phones. We're disconnected. We're fighting with each other online, comparing ourselves to others, and you name it. I talk a lot about investing and tech and building wealth over the long term is important, but making sure we're building a life worth living over the long term is even more important. We need to make sure we have a good understanding of what we're aiming at, what our values are, and why. The most important thing is investing in yourself. We're going to learn how we can all stop being stupid by looking into what actually makes human beings happy according to ancient wisdom. We often hear the argument that smart people aren't happy, and that maybe happiness is for stupid people. The thought process goes that the smarter you are, the more you can see behind the facade. You can see the risks and the downsides of everything. Because you're smart, you can see the cynicism and manipulation behind the many things portrayed as good for you or good for society. And then you can become cynical, and people can communicate their intelligence through cynicism. You know how to think, you understand things deeply, and that can get depressing. You're not smart because you're unhappy, but you can be unhappy because you're smart. So it's going to take a lot of work to get happy and feel better. On the bright side, smart people are good at figuring out the truth. The more you dig into certain truths, the naturally freer and more peaceful you become. So a good question to think about is, if you're so smart, why haven't you figured out how to be happy yet? Why do you insist on being miserable? Another important thing to understand is that reality is neutral. The world just reflects your own feelings back at you. Consider a tree. It doesn't know whether things are good or bad. You're born, you experience things, and then you die. How you choose to interpret things is up to you. And so we need to learn to control our minds. Our minds are very busy today. How good of a basketball player would LeBron be if he ran 20 miles every single day? He needs rest. To be effective at anything in life, you need a clear, calm, and collected mind. And so we shouldn't be filling our brains with non-stop information, one clickbait headline after the other, with bad news everywhere. We need to give our brains a break. It's important to understand the world we live in. The world we live in is not really one made of rocks, trees, and physical objects. It is a world of insults, opportunities, status symbols, betrayals, saints, and sinners. Some people will be rude. Some will play status games. All of these are human creations, real in their own way, but not real in the way that rocks and trees are real. These human creations exist only if you believe in them. They are the Matrix, and they are consensual hallucination. Okay, and another thing to be aware of is unconscious overclaiming. The studies show that human beings often overestimate the amount of credit they deserve. Think of your roommates in college. Were there disagreements about how to keep the place clean? It turns out that we all think we do more than our fair share. We are aware of all the little things that we do individually for the group, but we're aware of only a portion of everyone else's contributions. And to make matters worse, we often pick the thing that we care about. Maybe it's keeping the fridge clean. Others may not care as much about that particular thing. And they may care more about keeping the bathroom clean, for example. Now, obviously, sometimes people are just slobs, but be aware of unconscious overclaiming. When husbands and wives estimate the percent of household chores each does, their estimates total 120%. So be aware that we all overestimate the amount of work we actually do. Also, beware of noise. Our ever-judging minds give us constant flashes of approval and disapproval, along with the certainty that we are on the side of the good guys. All this moralism, righteousness, and hypocrisy, maybe humans will never reach lasting peace. So what can we do? The first step is to stop taking life so seriously. Accept that there are ups and downs in life and play out your role in the universe. To help with all this noise, meditation can be used to train your mind. Okay, and also a quick note on actual noise. The research shows that people who must adapt to new and chronic sources of noise, such as train tracks, never fully adapt. Their sleep patterns are disrupted. They're annoyed throughout the day, and we think, oh, I'll just get used to it. Just know, the studies suggest we never actually get used to it. Our mental health and quality of life deteriorates. Okay, and let's talk about goals real quick. We set goals as humans. Understand that most of the pleasure from a goal will be had in the pursuit of the goal with every step that takes you closer. The majority of the pleasure is not necessarily in attaining the goal. If you went on a hike just for the pleasure of taking off a heavy backpack at the end, you are a fool. People work hard at a task and expect some euphoric feeling at the end, but when they achieve success, they experience only moderate short-term pleasure, and they're left wondering, is that all there is? People who finally graduate with a PhD often report depression in the month afterwards. All those years studying, and it just kind of ends, and they're left with this empty feeling. Understand that pleasure comes from making progress towards goals rather than from achieving them. Eventually, the universe will end in heat death. It's just a matter of when. So life is literally about the journey. As Shakespeare said, things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing. And that brings us to the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is the problem that the riches you accumulate just raise your expectations and leave you no better off than you were before. We always want more than we have, like hamsters on a spinning wheel. We think, if only I had a nicer car, then I'd be happy. If only I had a bigger house, then I'd be happy. It's hedonic adaptation. You want something, you work to get it, you do get it, and then you're happy. But the problem is, you get used to the thing you have. You don't live happily ever after, as you thought you would. You end up at pretty much the same position as before you went through all that trouble. So then, you want more new things, and the cycle continues. The Stoics say that to escape the hedonic treadmill, you have to learn how to want the things you already do have. And you can do this with negative visualization. Imagine losing your house, your car, your job, or a loved one. These are gloomy thoughts, and we shouldn't dwell on them. But considering them for a few moments can enhance your perspective and well-being. And this brings us to money. After all, it turns out that money can buy happiness, but people spend it on the wrong things. There are things that would make people lastingly happier. For example, taking time off and spending it with friends and family. Also, reducing their commute time, even if that meant living in a smaller house, and also taking longer vacations. The problem is that people spend money on conspicuous consumption rather than inconspicuous consumption. Conspicuous and inconspicuous consumption follow different psychological rules. Conspicuous consumption refers to things that are visible to others that are taken as markers of a person's relative success. When everyone wore Timex watches, the first person in the office to buy a Rolex stood out. When everyone moved up to Rolex, it took a $20,000 Paytech Phillip to achieve high status. Rolex no longer gave as much satisfaction. Conspicuous consumption is a zero-sum game. Each person's move up devalues the possessions of others. Consider another example of conspicuous consumption. The studies show that people prefer to make $90,000 a year when everyone else makes $70,000 a year versus earning $100,000 a year, but everyone else earns $150,000 a year. The studies show that most of us actually prefer to make less money as long as we're making more than everyone else. And this is stupid. This is conspicuous consumption. Now consider time off, on the other hand. The studies also show that people would prefer to take more weeks of vacation regardless of how many weeks of vacation everyone else has. If someone gets 2 weeks of vacation and everyone else gets 1 week versus someone gets 3 weeks and everyone else gets 4 weeks, people will take more weeks of vacation no matter how they compare to everyone else. This is obvious, but we don't prefer the same when it comes to salary. More time off, regardless of what everyone else has, is an example of inconspicuous consumption. So stop wasting your money on conspicuous consumption. As a first step, work less, earn less, accumulate less, and consume more family time, vacations, and other enjoyable activities. Experiences give more happiness because they have greater social value. Most activities that cost more than $100 are things we do with other people, but expensive material possessions are often purchased in part to impress other people. Activities connect us to others. Objects often separate us. If everyone is chasing the same limited amount of prestige, then all are stuck in a zero-sum game, an eternal arms race, a world in which rising wealth does not bring rising happiness. The pursuit of luxury goods is the happiness trap. It is a dead end that people race toward in the mistaken belief that it will make them happy. Many people facing death report changes in values and perspectives. The reality that people often wake up to is that life is a gift that they have been taking for granted, and that people matter more than money. Another part of life and well-being is making decisions. First, understand that having more options is not always better. When people are given a larger array of choices, they are less likely to make a choice. And if they do, they are less satisfied with it. The more choices there are, the more you expect to find a perfect fit. But also, the larger the array of choices, the less likely it becomes that you pick the best item. You leave less confident in your choice. You are more likely to feel regret, and you are more likely to think about the options you did not choose. There are two ways to approach choices. You can be a maximizer, or you can be a satisficer. Those who try to maximize evaluate all the options, search for more information, and make the best choice to maximize their utility. Satisficers take a more laid-back approach. They evaluate the options until they find one that is good enough, and then they stop looking. With this laid-back approach, satisficers are not hurt by a lot of options. Maximizers end up making slightly better decisions on average, but they are less happy with their decisions, and they are more inclined to depression and anxiety. All right, now let's talk about freedom. Too much freedom can actually be hazardous to your health. Studies show that people living alone were most likely to kill themselves, married people less likely, and married people with children the least likely. Having strong social relationships strengthens the immune system, extends life more than does quitting smoking. Having strong relationships also increases the speed of recovery from surgery and reduces the risk of depression and anxiety disorders. An ideology of extreme personal freedom can be dangerous because it encourages people to leave homes, jobs, cities, and marriages in search of personal and professional fulfillment, thereby breaking the relationships that were probably their best hope for such fulfillment. Hell is other people, but so is heaven. Finally, let's talk about wisdom. Wise people are able to balance their own needs, the needs of others, and the needs of people or things beyond their immediate interaction. Ignorant people see everything in black and white. They rely heavily on the myth of pure evil, and they are strongly influenced by their own self-interest. The wise are able to see things from others' points of view, appreciate shades of gray, and then choose or advise a course of action that works out best for everyone in the long run. Wise people are able to balance three responses to situations: changing the self to fit the environment, changing the environment, or choosing to move to a new environment. This is summed up in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This video took a lot of time to make, so please show your support by liking and subscribing. This video is based on The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, which is one of the most important books I've read so far. Some content was also derived from Naval Ravikant's podcast. Like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.